Okay, response video to Pastor Jor Fox on priorities. And a lot of the call right now, a lot of people are feeling or sensing or wanting to talk about of leaving the cities and being further out, because it would be safer if there were some catastrophic events to happen to not be with the concentrated masses trying to get out. You know, I've kind of been around the survivalist movement for a while. And my first involvement with a lot of this stuff in the late 80s, early 90s, I was in the military. There were some books in circulation predicting that Nostradamus was predicting, claiming Nostradamus predicted World War III by 1991. Again, we've seen the Y2K scare, and a lot of people made a lot of personal and economic and business decisions based on, well, the world's ending on this date, and whatever we do, we know that the banking system's going to turn off, so we're not going to owe any more money. The government's going to turn off, so if we broke any laws, it doesn't matter, the government's going to turn off on January 1, 2000. And of course that didn't happen, and a lot of people were left kind of hanging. So I get a little jaded when there's kind of doom and gloom predictions that are based on kind of this self-feeding thing of somebody saying, okay, the world's going to end, we've got to go out to the backwoods, we've got to change our lifestyle, abandon careers and things in order to live like this. Especially when they're coming from people where they're not necessarily abandoning their source of income when that happens. I don't collect a retirement check from the military, I don't collect SSI or any kind of welfare or any kind of government assistance of any sort. I work for a living, and money I make is money I earn that I use to pay for things. Also, through a series of bad investments, my family wealth got kind of burned away, and that was, at one time they were wealthy enough that it actually took more than one generation for that to get lost. But I know that I got a few trinkets coming my way when my parents die, but it's not going to be any major, there's no major portfolios coming my way. There's nothing I can guarantee is I'd be able to pass on to much of anybody, let alone support myself. So if I'm in the backwoods rural areas, and I've been involved with some of these survival retreat places, it's a very fine point between these things being economically self-sustainable because they have the infrastructure for economic self-sustainability. There's some kind of industry out there. They have something. I was involved for a short time with a quasi-leftover commune type of thing that was run by a psychologist in California by the name of Claude Steiner. What I got to see at his property, which had eventually, was technically part of a commune, but technically it was kind of his. And what I got to see in that place was basically the ruins of one that had been functioning in the 70s. And we talked for several hours about, how that thing fell apart, how it muddles along. It's still there, but there was, at one point, they were building micro homes. They were building these yurts, these micro homes, and he showed me the workshop where they had the air lines coming from the ceiling, all in the 1970s. And they were building and selling these little off-grid micro homes even back when a solar power was like, you would buy a 20-watt solar panel and it was a big deal. It was back when I think it was Schaefer at Real Goods was just getting started, and all these people knew each other. But one of the things they realized, the guy over at Real Goods and his Solar Living Institute, they had to have a business that is centered around. And for a lot of the people that moved out to the backwoods, they lost track of that. There were a lot of people at some of those locations now where they're living on retirement or living on welfare or something like that. And one of the things that fell apart for them was not cultivating, having more children. Okay, probably the biggest problem with a lot of those little communities was they didn't figure out how to breed. One of the problems, they had a lot of gay tolerance in that stuff and didn't realize there's a consequence of that. You're not going to be breeding. There was a lot of women, lesbian couples, they get a guy around as a sperm donor for a little while, kick him out with a bill, with a child support bill. He's kicked out with a child support bill. there was a fair amount of that going on with some of those types of little communities and stuff. I've tried to get some of those people, maybe don't want to talk about it on video. There's a lot they don't want to talk about. And so when we look at that, we look at the community thing. You got to have an economic model or some kind of a business. You can employ people, support the families. There's a lot to go on apart from simply, well, we're going to move from an apartment in the city to an apartment in the suburbs and commute 2 hours, or move to the small town where everybody knows everybody, and if they don't know the newcomers, and the newcomers are talking this crazy survivalist type stuff, they're going to be speed dialing the FBI and the BATF and everybody they can, because it's the new news in the small town. There's these crazies from the city that want to do this, and that. And believe me, that happened. That happened in the Dalles, Oregon, when another one of these kind of an alternative religion, Hindu-y type group moved in, got big, got involved in politics, and then there was this back and forth thing. One of their security people ended up putting food poisoning in a salad bar, and that's what brought the feds down on them a lot harder than they probably would have come down on them. We know that when the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, when the government came down on them, there was very little support in Waco for the Branch Davidians. Not much at all. I mean, when somebody put up a billboard sign that said, "We support the BATF," it's not like anyone vandalized it or took it down. When the BATF and FBI agents were having reunions every year for 20 years at a park out there, nobody attacked them. Okay, nobody attacked them when they were having a reunion out there. A lot of the support for Branch Davidians came from places other than Waco. So it's very dangerous, and that's just a high-profile organization and situation. There's a lot of lower-profile ones where somebody moves from the city to the suburbs or the country, small town, as a survivalist, as a prepper, as a believer in some prophecies, and have become targeted because of it. And that's one of the reasons why I've been pushing, and I supported a lot of what you were talking about on the communities, the autonomous zone, the something that's behind the gate, the independent communities. And if somebody's just moving to the country and not becoming a part of something where there's already a network there, there's already a little bit of a political constituency, a business constituency out there, I'd say it's dangerous. And I would say that they're better off scouting places. This is what I've called the summer of road trips. Fuel is cheap right now, and people can afford to travel around, meet people face to face, figure out where everyone's head's at, where to participate in something, whether it's going to be in Missouri, your location, or was it Tennessee or Kentucky out at Pastor Dowell's location, or any one of the places in the American Redoubt area in Idaho or eastern Washington. Personally, I kind of like far northern California. It's just that when you do that, you're in a bad jurisdiction as far as being ruled from Sacramento. But there's also a lot of areas there which de facto are autonomous zones. They are not ruled from Sacramento. Everybody kind of knows you go this far up this particular road in the Lost Coast area, the Sacramento law kind of only selectively applies. Yet they're not totally going out and having some kind of a meeting and declaring independence. People kind of have this de facto state of Jefferson thing. There's a lot going on where I would tell people probably don't do a panic move out of the city, but try to get involved with some group, some organization, somebody who's trying to rehabilitate a homestead or farmstead somewhere. All those things are very labor intensive. And to get things going, to get the infrastructure, tractors, and like there's one I'm involved with in Washington. We got to pitch in, we got to figure out how to get a cider press. They cost money and they're only used a couple times a year, but we figured out if we're going to do the cider, if we're going to do the cider beer and all this other type of stuff, we got to have a cider press. We were spending money on, one of the guys had a cargo trailer where we had a dirt road out there. It kept blowing tires on his trailer every time. It was $120 a tire. I provided a little 4x4 truck for this place, And then I thought it was good enough to provide the little truck, and the people out there, somebody would keep it up on maintenance. No, that didn't happen. So I was also sending money and sending parts to keep this thing up. And if I were having to live out there full time and trying to make money on the local economy in the backwoods areas where, I mean, they don't want to pay for anything out there. I have to live in a city and make money, and then it actually worked better. I was just sending money as I went and visited the place a few times a year, built that cabin which you see in some of my other videos. And that whole situation ended up failing because of the greed and dishonesty of the original property owner who had invited us out there. You know, it turned out to be very dishonest and greedy about the situation. And if we had more people out there, it probably just would have been more people who suffered the damage from it. On the other hand, if we had more part-time people like myself, we might have been able to just buy this guy's interest out at a better rate than what he started to demand after we already had a contract. And then when he died on us, we're stuck even worse. Now we're dealing with a probate attorney and some real shady people in the chemical waste business who we think may have already put something on the property, but we don't know. You know, I have to go out this spring and take heat thermal photographs of some suspect areas where there's a bunch of dead plant life. So there's a lot of things that we don't want people jumping into a bad situation out in the country, because a bad situation out in the country can be a lot worse than bad situations out in the inner city. Okay, we've had more theft problems in some of these locations than you know, in the city, but it depends. Okay, so anyway, some of those areas, yeah, the common everyday thief isn't going to get out there. The hardcore scavengers, I know people in Northern California, they'd set up some of these retreat places. The scavengers are watching them with binoculars all day, wait for them to leave, and then as soon as the guy's going to town, they're out unbolting his well pump, you know. And then when we needed a well pump, a series of pumps actually for the whole water system at the new place in Washington, it was like, do we buy new or do we buy used? And then it's kind of a suspicious, shady thing that could have some bad karma attached to it, because, okay, how does somebody get a used well pump? You know, did they steal it somewhere? It's expensive infrastructure to have off-grid infrastructure, and I really think the only way it ever works is when people do it in groups. There's a guy building that survival castle, I think, somewhere out in your area. It's not done. You know, it's a big raggedy construction site. The only way that guy's going to get that thing completed is to involve several other families in it. Anyway, we'll talk more later, hopefully.